Thank you very much. We have our first bill, and I think we're ready for that. House Bill 16, excuse me, Senate Bill 69. Got to get in the right mode here. Relative to the acceptance of or rejection of charitable contributions, gifts, or donations by local school boards. And welcome, Senator Murphy.
Good morning,
Thank you
Mr.
for
Chairman.
bringing this to us.
Thank you for the welcome. I'm Chair, members of the committee. My name is Keith Murphy. I represent the people of District 16. I had an issue in a town in my district last year that some of you probably read about at the time. And the issue was there were some families that had rung up some school debt, lunch debt specifically, and a local church approached the school administrator, basically offered to cover the debt, wipe it clean, and he turned it down flat and said, if you go to the school board, I'll tell them not to take it. And his decision instead was to go to court and sue 5 families for that debt. I think a lot of people read these news comments and thought, why? It made no sense to sue poor families when you had an organization willing to write the check to cover the debt. And without getting into that person's rationale or reasoning, I filed this legislation essentially so the discussion would have to take place and the school board would have to vote to accept or reject the gift if any similar circumstance were to arise again. So there may be certain times where it makes sense to not take the money from a certain group if the group puts strings on the money, if the group is of a nature where people think it's unethical to take the money. This was a church group, and they're willing to write a check, and I don't understand why. So I think voters deserve an answer if this were to happen again, and that's all it does. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee? Yes, Representative Balboni.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. I'm just curious, that you want to have an open session, a public session, only if it's being rejected. Should you also have an open session if it's being accepted?
The reason that I phrased it this way was that there may be times where people or organizations or companies wish to make a gift anonymously. And in such case, they're taking the money. The school board can honor that desire. So that's why that's there.
Follow-up?
Yeah, the follow-up would be, wouldn't there also might be some ones that are offering gifts that might be rejected that would want to remain anonymous? Wouldn't it be a similar circumstance?
If they're turning down money and suing people in court instead, I think that vote should be taken in public. However, the bill's with your committee. If you choose to amend it, I'll certainly honor that request. And I would carry the banner for a vote for concurrence.
Thank you. Representative Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for taking my question. Is there a possibility that school boards can already act on a decision of whether or not to clear the lunch debts at the end of the year or do some other sort of amelioration before it would get to the point of litigation?
That is absolutely the case. They can choose to do that already. In this case, 5 families were sued for thousands of dollars.
Further questions? Representative Woodcock.
Thank you. Welcome. I appreciate this bill, and I just want to follow up on Representative Balboni's point. Would you be amenable to having this bill with a slight change that says rejected or accepted?
I would be amenable. That same conversation was had in the Senate Education Committee. I didn't object then. I won't object now.
Okay.
I think that would.
Okay, thank you. I think the concept of the transparency and public awareness is terrific, but I think it should be equal on both sides. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, Representative Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. The other facet of this I'm curious about is student privacy, stigma around, lunch debt, that kind of thing. When these hearings would happen, I understand your intent. How do you ensure that those types of disclosures are not happening?
Well, I don't think anything currently requires a school board to release the names of the affected families. The school administrator would come forward and say, we've received an offer of $5,000 to pay the debt of 6 affected families, and the alternative is litigation. Shall we accept that? And I think that that's a clear enough motion that would be accepted by the board.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Damon, and thank you for sitting in with us today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question, Senator, and thank you for bringing this forward. I had similar concerns. My question is just to hear perspective from you on sort of the issues around meal debt and any other considerations that districts might put in place to not have there be meal debt. I mean, should school districts be able to sue families for meal debt, in your opinion?
I believe that school districts should have the option to sue families or anybody else that owes the school district money. Having said that, it should be a very last resort, in my opinion. It's something that happens extremely infrequently after all other alternatives are exhausted. I sense that maybe the conversation is trying to go in one direction or another, and I want to stick to this particular example.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Senator, for
Thank you.
being here. Was there anyone else who would like to speak on Senate Bill 69? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 69, and we have a couple of minutes until our next bill. Senate Bill 206. Welcome to, we've got a few additions. So thank you for being here. This is I'll get it eventually. Senate Bill 206, requiring public schools to adopt policies to limit the use of cell phones by students. And we welcome Ms. Malillo, who is going to present this for Senator Ricciardi.
Yes. Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Tricia Malillo, as he said, the Senate Majority Caucus Director. Okay, sorry. And I'm here to introduce Senate Bill 206 for Senator Ricciardi. Senate Bill 206, as amended, is a proactive step towards improving educational outcomes and student well-being by requiring public schools to adopt clear policies limiting cell phone use during the school day. Research consistently shows that excessive smartphone use in schools contributes to distraction, reduced academic performance, increased social anxiety, and cyberbullying. By restricting personal device use during school hours, students can remain engaged in their learning and develop healthier habits around technology use. The Senate amendment made 3 changes to the bill as introduced. It replaced shall prohibit with shall define on line 4. It changed local educator associations with school district teachers, starting at the end of line 6. And also it added on line 12, the sentence following the year 1964. It added, thought it best to include enforcement processes. So it added a sentence that talked about enforcement of the rule. This legislation balances structure with flexibility by allowing exceptions for medical, disability, and language support needs. Additionally, it mandates collaboration with teachers and parents, ensuring that policies reflect community needs. Students will benefit from less distractions, increased social interaction, and improved focus on learning. Senate Bill 206 is a common sense solution to a growing issue. Many schools in New Hampshire have already initiated restrictions on cell phone use during class time, and passage of Senate Bill 206 will ensure that standard policies are consistently implemented across all schools in New Hampshire and that classrooms remain places of focused learning. Thank you for your time and consideration. And I will answer questions if I can, but if not, I can take them back to Senator Ricciardi and get you the answers.
Great. Thank you so much for presenting this to us. Questions? Representative Selleck.
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. I'm curious whether, the way this bill is written, whether if a school district looks at a number of issues and determines they wish not to have a cell phone policy as a district, if there's flexibility for that choice by the district in this version.
You know, I am not sure, but I can get that answer for you. I believe it says shall develop and adopt a policy, so I believe they will have to have some policy. I don't think it tells them what the policy should be, but it says adopt a policy governing cell phone use. So
Okay.
it could be not during the hours of 9 and 12 or something. You know, they have that flexibility.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Woodcock.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see you. Thank you. If the chair allows, I have a couple of questions. On your line 7, we had update annually. Is that consistent with most school board policies, or they updated annually?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that question, but I can.
I mean, because it just seems to me that
That'd be a lot.
may not be the case, having sat on school boards.
Okay.
May I follow?
Follow up.
Thank you,
Yes.
sir. The second part, I do have a question. On line 12, the part that you talked about the addition of the enforcement or lack thereof in the classroom or disregarded by students. What is that you anticipate there?
Let me see. In the hearing report, sorry. We had the School Board Association and the Teachers Union just speak that they wanted to create clear policies, and if there was no enforcement, or that could be just if you're caught with your phone, it gets taken away, just something that backs up the school's policy. So it can't just be, you can't have your phones in school. It has to, I guess they want some teeth behind it. I'm not sure what that looks like, but I can ask around and see, because some schools in New Hampshire have already done this, so we can get some examples for you. I can
Well,
send
that's
it.
good. Just to follow up this, yeah, and I want to go back to that point, irrespective of the fact that maybe it came from the NEA or the School Board Association. When we talk about enforced in the classroom, the policy not being enforced in the classroom, that seems to me that reflects on teacher discipline. And that would be teacher discipline, because the only person who does enforce it in the classroom
Right.
obviously would be the teacher. I wonder if this is just straying far afield from what the intent of the policy is.
Okay. And I can ask that question.
Okay.
I can get back to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Representative Balboni?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. I'm wondering if the senator would have any aversion to including charter schools in this bill as well, because charter schools are public schools.
Okay, I will ask, and I'm going to send a big email to the chair and the committee with those answers.
Representative Cornell, did you have a question?
And I don't think, well, we had one too. I don't know if you would be opposed to adding other personal electronic communication devices
Yeah, that's
in addition to cell phones.
okay.
Representative Freeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming in front of us. So,
Sure.
do you know if this bill is a response to school districts and teachers begging the state for some direction on cell phone usage in the classrooms?
Thank you for the question. I am not sure what brought the bill forward for Senator Ricciardi. I can ask her if there was an instance or who brought it and get back to you.
Yes, Representative Woodcock?
One final, thank you.
Sure. No problem.
Get your pad going. I guess the last question, though, you mentioned the same comment twice, and that is that many schools already have these policies.
Yeah.
We've had a couple of schools in the House bill version
Okay.
came and testified that they're working and what they're doing, some were bell to bell, and they had the different,
Okay.
pieces. So my question is, if local school boards can already do this,
Right.
and they have the power to do this, and they have the authority to do this, why would we possibly want to legislate that they have to do this?
I believe the idea behind it is so that it's consistent throughout the state of New Hampshire. So if you're moving from one school district to another, there's the same, excuse me, everybody has a policy. Right now, there are some school districts that don't have any policy and no way to, I guess, address the issue if there's a problem with cell phones. And everybody wants a consistent.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Representative Selig?
Thank you. Just to follow up on his question. So essentially, if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying that we want to make sure there's a state policy to mandate local control
No.
around the issue?
No, I don't believe that's it. I think that it is locally controlled by the school districts. They have flexibility in what policy they make. They don't all have to be the same policy, just that there will be a policy, is what I believe, her intent behind it, but I will ask her and she can get the answers to you all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Representative Murray?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question being a couple of things. Some districts already have technology policies that include this kind of thing. Folks sign them at the beginning of the year to say, yes, I understand
Sure.
the student handbook, et cetera, et cetera. They sit down, look over those with their students. Does this have the ability to fall into those student handbooks, that type of thing,
Yes,
do you
absolutely.
think? Okay.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. And it's
I will get those answers to you.
great. I'll just point out that I think that everybody's pretty much in agreement that there has to be a policy, that this is an issue. The governor mentioned it. We in the House passed a bill, and now we have this one also. So I think it's just a matter of
Working together.
coming up with the right language and getting something done.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
for your time.
Was there anyone else who would like to testify on Senate Bill 206? Seeing none?
No.
Oh,
Could we
yes,
have Ms. Wilson come up and just testify a little bit about policies?
okay. I tried.
I know.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Becky Wilson from the New Hampshire School Boards Association. We did sign in support of this bill. We understand the desire for there to be a cell phone policy at schools. I'm happy to take any questions regarding some of the things that were brought up with the previous speaker in the introduction of the bill. If there are questions, I can
Did
try
you
to
have
clarify.
Specific question? Oh, Representative Balboni?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, if you have an idea of how many school districts already do have cell phone policies?
Thank you for the question. I don't know offhand, although I would say, I think in previous hearings about bills of a similar nature, I think we heard that there are a large number of cell phone policies, particularly for districts that have a middle and high school, maybe not so much for the K-8 districts or some of the smaller districts. But I think that there's certainly an appetite for districts to try to come up with some sort of policy around cell phone use or personal device use. I don't have a number per se.
Follow-up?
The follow-up would be, I know that the school board associations put out sample policies. Is this one of the ones that you do put out a sample policy on?
Thank you for the question. I would have to go back to my notes specifically, but I believe when the other House version of this type of bill was before you, I think Mr. Christina might have said we did have a personal device use policy, but I think it still included things like pagers and beepers. So I don't think it's been updated in quite some time. I think everyone recognizes the need to sort of update what's available to students and to faculty and how to sort of incorporate that into a usable policy. And just to speak to, I think there was a question earlier about this line, perhaps on line 12, about the administration's involvement. I'm not sure that this is the wording necessarily that the school boards would put into this bill, but I think the catalyst was a concern about perhaps from NEA or other teachers groups somehow delineating the fact that it wouldn't all be on the teachers to enforce this type of policy, that at some point there would be some administrative buy-in, and how to capture that in a policy. I'm not sure. We could certainly work with you on the wording on that, but I'm not sure this is the wording per se that we would choose. But I think that was the intention, was to try to make sure that there was something in a policy that would say at what point the administration would get involved versus just the teachers trying to enforce it at the classroom level.
Representative Cornell?
Thank you for taking my question. On line 7, it says updated annually. Are most policies updated annually, or is that a good idea?
Thank you for the question. Not typically are they updated annually. They might be reviewed by the policy committee at a district, but annually they might review all of them and make a determination about which policies may need to be updated. Certainly if there's legislation that's coming from the previous session that might impact policies, those would need to take priority. So I think specifying exactly when they need to be updated might be a little bit of an overreach. Updating them, accordingly, or some other version of that. But most policy committees have a rotation in which they're updating their policies. But to update every policy annually would be a pretty heavy lift, I think, for most districts.
Representative Sully?
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. I was just thinking about, for example, the town of Newington, which has a K to 4 or maybe K to 5. I'm not sure exactly, but do you think a district of that nature that only goes to the elementary level needs to go through the process of putting together a full policy like this? Is that going to be a good use of their time and energy?
Thank you for the question, Representative. I think you have districts that are all sorts of makeup in this state. You also have districts that have no schools. I mean, you have school boards that are, overseeing students who are tuitioned to other districts for schooling. So I think you need to be mindful about perhaps how you're wording this. If it's every school district needs to have a policy, what if you're a district that has no school? What if you are a K-4 district, or, something to that effect? Is there a way to sort of maybe add some language that would be a little bit more specific about what would need to be in a policy for a K-2 school versus a middle school versus a middle high school, et cetera?
Yes, Representative Woodcock?
Thank you. Some of the questions you've already answered, so you're lucky. But thank you. Good morning. Nice to see you again.
Good morning.
I'd like to go back, if I may, to that line 12 description, and I'd asked prior about that. I have two questions. One is the term here, administration. does that mean the superintendent? Does that mean the lead teacher? Does that mean the principal of the building? And is it going to vary from building to building? I mean, that's my first part of the question. The second part, if I may, same question, is where it says enforcement in the classroom, it seems to me now we're talking about teacher discipline, protocols, actions, and I'm concerned why that would be in a policy and what that might mean from one school district to another.
Thank you for the questions, Representative Woodcock. As I said before, I believe the intention of this. I certainly don't want to speak for Senator Ricciardi, and I don't want to speak for whoever helped with this particular wording. I don't believe that enforcing the teacher's discipline towards a teacher for not enforcing a policy, I don't think that is what this was intended to say. I think it was trying to say that if something is not happening at the classroom level, if a teacher is addressing a problem at the classroom level, that the teacher would not be left, for flip wording, holding the bag, that there would be somebody that would, at the administration at some point, would come in, whether that's building administration, superintendent, department head. I can't really say. I think this wording is maybe problematic in that way, that maybe there's a better way to put an aspect of the policy in there that just talks about perhaps, enforcement generally within the school building or within a classroom, or talks about classroom enforcement of a policy versus disciplinary procedures. I think those are two different things. Teachers enforcing a policy and disciplinary procedures for students who are not following the rules. Those are two different things, especially if there's some latitude allowed in this policy for students perhaps who need access to their devices for special education purposes or English language learners, or perhaps for instructional use. There may be times where it's appropriate for teachers to allow students to use their personal devices for an instructional purpose. And I think you had tried to capture that in some previous wording. So, trying to match that up with some of these other things that have already been talked about in this committee, I think would be important.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Yes, Representative Nato.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. Within this, the bill here, it doesn't specifically say what I think we all kind of getting at is it's a distraction for everybody in the classroom, not just the one who is using the cell phone, but possibly everybody else as well, because the teacher's like speaking to the child. So is there anywhere in here we can specifically put this wording like distraction possibly in there to be like targeting a certain thing, I guess, which that's what it is, I believe, so.
Thank you for the question, Representative Nato. I mean, certainly this bill is your bill at this point in this committee in terms of how you want to word the bill. I think it would be important to consider the fact that some students do need access to their personal devices for lots of different reasons in the classroom. So to balance out your need to articulate that cell phone use is distracting in the classroom, but also balance that with the fact that some students are going to need access to their personal devices, that I would leave that up to the committee in terms of how to word that, if that was really important to you to clarify that somehow, that's the catalyst for the bill. But again, I think a lot of policies, we don't certainly articulate in writing what the catalyst for the policies are necessarily. We just put the policy in place in terms of what's in the actual policy. We don't sort of write a narrative typically that explains why a policy is needed. It would be important, I think, for people to be able to articulate that verbally to people as to why a policy might be necessary. But I'm not sure you need to get into the routine of putting into writing what the catalyst for every policy was when the policy came about. But that would certainly be up to the committee. You're welcome.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Wilson. And seeing no further cards or interest in testifying, we'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 206 and move right into Senate Bill 57, establishing a committee to analyze reducing the number of school administrative units. And welcome once again, Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Senator Keith Murphy. I represent the people of District 16. A little more direct there. In most of the United States, schools are run at the county level. We here in New England have this long tradition of having town-based school districts and multi-town SAUs. And that has for a very long time been terrific. It has the benefit of being able to reach out and contact your local school board members, running them into the grocery store, voting at your town meetings, and having the ability to really direct your local community school. And I think there's a lot of value in that. And I'm not trying to overturn that, but I think we need to consider the savings that might be obtained with consolidating at the county level. This bill creates a study committee which would consider the possibility of moving to a system where each county has a school district, and then each Manchester and Nashua, given their size, would have a school district. So we go from roughly 200-ish SAUs down to 12. The savings that might be obtained from that, from eliminating redundant departments, HR, legal, IT, redundant administrators, is tremendous. And I think it's worth asking the question. And so I'm seeking to gain information with this committee. When the state is facing a continual series of lawsuits regarding education funding, when we have teachers in one town in my district, teachers start at $34,000. These are college-educated professionals making mid-30s. And school administrators, in some cases, are making over $200,000. When Auburn can educate their school children for $14,000 a year, but some school districts now are pushing $40,000 a year per student, there's clearly some inefficiencies to be considered. And so I hope you'll look kindly on the bill. I'm happy to take any questions. Again, I'm not necessarily endorsing this option. I'm saying it's worth doing the math and wondering what we might save if we went down this road. If it's hundreds of millions of dollars, it's a trade-off. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Representative Selig?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two separate questions, if I may, but I'll ask for the follow-up appropriately. And thank you for taking my question. I used to be a teacher in Maryland, where it is county-based systems, and I'm just wondering if you looked at the structures of the superintendent's offices in those county-based districts, because we had, if I am remembering accurately, we had something like 17 superintendents, assistant superintendents, because we had assistant superintendents for early elementary, late elementary, middle school English, middle school math, middle school science, and the same essentially at the high school, right? So all of those subdivisions had their own assistant superintendents, and so those administrative costs, in order to manage the, 200 schools in our district or 40 schools, whatever number it was, I was at one of 16 high schools that got fed into from countless middle schools and countless elementary schools. So I don't know that how that necessarily works out to a cost saving, but also to having direct connection with superintendents and the relationships.
Yeah. So it's serendipitous that you taught in Maryland. I went to school in Maryland. I was a student at Baltimore County school system. And yes, I'm well aware they have multiple assistant superintendents. Whether they have hundreds of assistant superintendents. Again, I'm not necessarily saying there is cost savings. I'm saying it's worth asking the question. It's worth doing the math. If we can look at comparable size school systems across the country, and if 45 out of 50 states do it this way, there should be no shortage of data to consider. So we can ask the question, do the math, and maybe we come back and say, there's really no money to be saved here. But it's something that's, I think, worth considering.
Follow up, please.
Follow up.
Thank you. And then my other part of that question is, I think about, so I live in a district where we don't have tax caps. People are willing to pay the costs of our cooperative school system. But there's a couple of towns that are further north in my county that have very, very tight tax caps and very tight limits on costs, where my district may not agree at all with the things that they're doing, and the reason that their costs are different are because they're choosing to do it that way. And so I'm wondering about how you're going to reconcile those elements for where there's such disparate views of how to value and work through education.
You are pointing out a benefit of local decision-making, and I acknowledge that benefit. And I don't take anything away from that benefit. That is a question that would have to be answered by this committee as far as how that would be accomplished. All I'm saying is it's worth gathering the information and coming out with a relative number. If this committee looked and said, well, we'd save $2 million a year statewide, I don't think it's worth even considering. If it comes back and says it saves 300, 400 million, I think we have a different conversation.
Representative Murray?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Full disclosure, I am a county chair on the fiscal appropriation side of the delegation. So, and I'm trying to think about your request of involving the county commissioners. While they have oversight over real estate and other things like that, the fiscal side of things is really done by the delegation. And so I am curious to know how or why you chose commissioners only, or if you can speak to that.
That's a great question, and I have to admit I don't have a copy of the bill in front of me. And so I'm not sure I'd be able to. You know what? I do have a copy of the bill in front of me. Thank you. So the members of the committee involved is 2 members of the Senate and 3 members of the House.
And then I see on line 15, I'm sorry.
Right. The committee may consult with county commissioners. If you would, is anyone you would like to add to that? I would certainly welcome that amendment.
Representative Damon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator, for taking my, actually, 3 questions. So, following up on the composition of the committee and who they might be consulting with, I'm somewhat surprised that there's no one in the composition of the committee that isn't a legislator. I think it might be worthwhile to have someone from DOE, some member of the public, some folks who are actively engaged in administrating schools. Had you considered that?
I considered that. Ultimately, it's our responsibility as legislators to determine how the state allocates its funding and our education policy as a state legislature. If we open up the can of worms, then we're going to have an entirely different debate as far as who goes into the committee. How is it balanced? Frankly, how is it balanced in terms of interest? If we're going to have someone with the Department of Education and okay, the teachers unions, now we've got to allow in groups from the other side. And I think that opens up a very large committee, becomes a very large committee that is destined to argue to the end of time. I don't often do study committees. This is my 6th term. I don't do study committees as a general rule. I'm making an exception here, but I'm trying to keep the committee small on purpose so that it can actually produce some useful information, useful legislation that we might consider.
Follow up, Mr. Chair?
Hello?
Thank you. So you previously stated in response to a prior inquiry that you would be receptive in Section 3, where it notes county commissioners and 2 organizations, that perhaps there's opportunity to put more entities in there. So New Hampshire School Administrators Association.
I think that the committee should be free to meet and consult with any interested parties, including the School Administrators Association. There's a difference between consulting with them and adding them to the committee as a member.
Mr. Chair, I have one more on this same topic.
Quickly, please.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Without trying to, I'll use your phrase, open a can of worms or offend anyone, I think all of us who are involved in education at the State House are aware that it is a very partisan topic in many ways at this time. Would you be open to the membership, the 2 members of the Senate being of different parties, and similarly the members of the House of Representatives representing different parties specified in the bill?
I think so. My initial reaction is I think so. You've got 3 members of the House, obviously, whatever party's the majority at the time would probably get the 2 votes, but that's up to this committee. It's your bill at this point.
Thank you.
Representative Freeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator, for coming in front of us. So I want to understand this very clearly. This is just a study committee. Nothing that comes out of this study committee will be legislation. Nothing that comes out of this study committee will be in the form of a bill. It's strictly for suggestions. Is that not correct?
In short, yes, it's to gather information and make recommendations,
Thank you.
Representative Murray?
which may become legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for taking my question. The other thing, I do have to say, I think what we were talking about here is a categorical shift between commissions and committees. So those are two different things and they operate very differently.
Yes.
But I will say that I think that looking at a shift like this for education to have some sort of oversight at a county level is a very big change.
Right. Is there a question?
And so my question is, would you be open to considering a commission versus a committee?
I would, again, the bill is in the possession of the committee, and what you do with it is, at this point, it's out of my control.
Yeah.
I would urge you not to go down that path because, in my experience, the amount of productivity from a committee of people is inversely proportional to the size of the committee. And if you turn this into a study commission involving 15 members of the public, I think you're less likely to get anything that's actually useful.
Representative Damon?
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. So I represent half of Sullivan County. There are 5 school districts in my representative district. 2 of them are cooperative school districts that cross county lines. So appreciate that if there is a study committee, they will need to look at that, but I'm wondering if that's anything that's been considered in the drafting of this bill, how that would fall.
If the committee came back and decided this was a terrific idea and we should go down this path, and then the legislature as a whole decided to go down that path, ultimately, the SAUs, that structure that we have, would cease to exist. The properties of those districts would go into a new school district for each county. And so any SAUs that cross county lines would be split. But ultimately, that is a decision to be studied by this committee and by eventually the legislature and any future legislation.
Follow-up?
I think I need clarification, please. I'm not sure I understood part of your answer. Were you indicating that the cooperative districts that cross county lines, so have, towns participating in the existing school districts that are in 2 different counties, that those districts would be broken apart?
Well, the committee would be looking at the concept of county-based school systems. The counties could, I guess the school districts could decide to continue those SAUs by agreement, but this is for a committee to look at county-based school districts.
Representative Murray?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have one other question regarding the reporting out deadline of November 1st. So in the event that a committee were to be established and look at this and be reporting out on November 1st, they would essentially be looking at budgeting figures from the counties in arrears and not really having any sort of future projection of impact to counties. So I'm curious if there is, if there's any consideration for bumping that up in a different time frame or
Having been sentenced to serve time in this building over the summer at an earlier time, I would welcome an amendment to go several months after November 1st.
So again, for the committee, this is now our bill, as the senator has pointed out. So if we want to change effective dates or composition, that's our decision to make. But Representative Selleck.
Thank you, and thank you for taking my other question. I'm also thinking about the debts that different school districts have. For example, we have a school that we bonded for, 20 more years. I've lost track of where we are in our process. So, other districts in our county may not have debt or may have more debt. How does that get? I'm just trying to understand how that could get reconciled, and I recognize that would be part of the work of the study committee.
Yes.
But I'm trying to get my head around how do you take my debt and give it to Representative Litchfield, for example, if her community has no debt, and I'm sure doesn't want my district's debt for our gorgeous middle school.
Representative, this is a this is a detailed question. Obviously, this committee ponders the concept of a monumental shift in how we address and fund education. And I, as state senator, can't sit here and answer that question. I think that's really up to this committee as it goes through this possibility of a huge shift. I would, I can sit here and guess, but I think that anything that I guess is going to be not nearly have the value to you of what this committee would produce.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much
Thank you, Mr.
for being here this morning, Senator. And Senator, maybe you could do a card for this bill as well. Was there anyone else who wanted to testify on this bill? Seeing none, we'll close this hearing, and in a few minutes, we'll start up with Senate Bill 97. We'll open the hearing on our last bill of the morning, which is Senate Bill 97 relative to the intra-district public school transfers. And we welcome Senator Sullivan to Education Policy Committee.
Thank you very much. My name is Victoria Sullivan. I represent Senate District 18, which is Manchester wards 5 through 9 in the town of Litchfield. And it is very nice to be back in House Education. This bill, SB 97FN, simply allows students to go to any school in their district as long as there's capacity. We worked with the School Boards Association on this bill to put in some language around the, what happens if there isn't capacity, how the school districts will handle that. And the reason that I put in this bill is because I have worked with several families in my city of Manchester who had reasons that they needed to get their children into a school outside of their zip code that they were assigned to. Some of it is childcare. I had a family who the grandparents were very willing to take care of the child in the morning, bring them to their school, have them come stay with them in the afternoon, and the parents would pick them up later. But the grandparents didn't have transportation. The school was in walking distance, so they would walk the child to school, but they had to fight. We really had to fight with the district to allow this to happen. The alternative would have been the child goes to the school in their zip code and they're in preschool, morning school care, and then they're in school all day, and then they're in after school care. And it's so much better for them to be in the care of their grandparents and a family member. So there were a lot of different reasons to bring this forward, but most of it was parents are just tired of the fight. They're paying the same taxes as everybody else, and there's no reason that they can't go to a school that they feel is in the best interest of their child. Again, in Manchester, we have one school that has 77 different languages spoken. So there are a lot of kids that need a lot of attention from teachers, and the kids that don't need that attention are sometimes just passed over. They're sort of just, they don't get the same kind of attention that other students get when they might need it. Students that are overachievers sometimes get lost. So this is just the opportunity for parents to take the opportunity to seek out the best education for their children within their own district. There is no additional cost to the taxpayers, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Senator. Questions for Senator Sullivan? Representative Balboni.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. You mentioned at the beginning that it only applied to intra-district, but if you look at line 10, it clearly states that that it also applies to, I'll read it. The parent or guardian of a student may also apply to the superintendent of the student's district of residence if the parent or guardian believes it would be in the best interest of the student to change the student's school or assignment to another public school, public academy, or an approved private school which is outside the district.
Thank you for the question. And there was some confusion on this in the Senate as well. That is existing law. That what we're introducing here doesn't change that existing law, and that's in that case, parents would have to actually present a case to the superintendent and ask for that to happen. That's existing law. The only thing that I'm adding is that intra-district based solely on what is in the best needs of the child. So in the case of intra-district, they won't need to put together a portfolio or build a case. They can simply just go to the school and say, I believe this is in the best interest of my child, for my child to go to this school instead, and that's it. So that other phrasing, all of that is already in existing law.
Representative Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. So the question I do have is that what you seem to be testifying to initially is actually a manifest hardship request, correct? And so this does seem like this is opening the door for potentially, because the lines preceding it, 11 and 12, say unless the student is experiencing a manifest educational hardship,
right,
applications pursuant to this paragraph. So the preceding stuff seems to be in reference to just an intra-district transfer. So I'm just wanting to proceed with caution here with regard to Representative Balboni's question.
Thank you. And again, that is existing law, all of that. I think they only rephrased it slightly to make it clearer, but that is existing law. We had the School Boards Association come forward and testify that that is existing law. If you look at line 24, that's really what this bill is actually encompassing within the district. The superintendent shall consider only whether specifically requested school has the ability to accommodate the student based on teacher-student ratio and existing capacity. When you're talking about manifest hardship, again, you have to present a case to the superintendent stating that you need to, that there are reasons why. This is simply, I feel it's the best interest of my child.
Representative Murray, yes.
Thank you. And so with regard to lines 24 through 27, one of the questions I do have is whether or not the receiving district intra-district transfer request you're only talking about student to teacher ratio. It's not clear to me if that is the classroom teacher or any other specialists perhaps that might have capacity. Are they looking at the whole picture?
Thank you for the question. And that's why the School Boards Association asked us to put in language that tells the district they have to decide what that is, how they're going to accommodate students. If there isn't capacity, how they're outlining capacity. So that's up to the school district to put together that policy so parents are clear. You're welcome.
Representative Selig.
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. I'm just looking at lines 5 and 6 where it seems to say in there that it would be to transfer to a specific public school, public academy, or approved private school within the district. And so you're saying that according to the way this is written, that does not look like it's existing law as it exists. But I'm curious about that, and I'm also curious related to within sending students, public school students to private schools, related to providing transportation if they're going willy-nilly anywhere in the district. Who's responsible for all of that from this?
Thank you. So parents will be responsible for transportation within the district. And again, lines 5 to 6, that is all existing law. That is manifest hardship. That is all existing law. This does not change it. I believe that OLS simply clarified that language. They cleaned it up a little bit, but that is not changing. It's in existing law. Only line 24 intra-district is what this bill is referring to.
Oh,
Do you know where we would find that in our law books about this?
it's on page 537 in your book. Representative Murray.
Thank you. I did have another question with regard to parents, quote, footing the bill for the transfer intra-district. Is that what I don't want to misrepresent what you were saying, Senator. Did you say that it would be the burden on the parent to provide transportation?
Yes.
Regardless of whether or not the child has an IEP or a 504 that require alternate transportation?
So that doesn't circumvent any federal law or IDEA law. That is current law. If a child requires transportation regardless of where they're going for school, that is already current law. So that it does not circumvent special education law.
One follow-up.
Follow-up.
And I'm just wanting to make sure I was understanding, but I think previous to your, in your previous testimony regarding capacity, if you will, it wasn't clear to me whether or not capacity meant just the regular ed classroom or other specialists and providers. So I guess I was curious about how those two things jive with one another.
Right. So capacity is generally how many the per student to teacher ratio. But if you're talking about special education, which is like where I think you're going on this, there's a whole different set of laws that pertain to special education that are already, this does not change special education law in any way.
Representative Woodcock.
Thank you, and good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you.
Just a question. I'm a little slow on the uptake here.
It's Monday morning, so I think we're all.
Yeah, I'm still on Sunday night. Go Huskies. So, if in fact my child, I want to move him from my public school to a private school outside the district, I'm having a hard time understanding where that payment comes from. If the superintendents don't waive, a private school, say, as a director of the president of the school.
Thank you for taking that. Thank you for the question. Thank you for taking my question. I'm used to being on the other side. So this does not alter that in any way. That's existing law currently. That part of and I know they made it confusing putting it into this chapter and including this verbiage in the actual bill. We're actually only looking at line 24. Everything above that is actually existing law. And in that case, it would manifest hardship, and there's a process that people would go through for that. Also, education freedom accounts can be used in that capacity as well. But that's actually not what's in this bill. That's already existing law.
Hey, follow up.
Follow-up.
Just for clarity, I mean, because this is not necessarily talking about a manifest hardship. This is talking about, I just want to voluntarily transfer my youngster from public school, my public charter school where I go now, to a school, a private school outside the district. So even with that, I still, can you just tell me where I can find how the public school is going to pay for a non-manifest hardship piece to a private academy?
Thank you. So this bill does not allow for that. This bill only allows for intra-district school choice. So everyone in the same, like for Manchester, everybody in the same town can choose a school that goes to it. Anything above that is already existing law that talks about manifest hardship and taking a child and putting them into a private school. That's existing law. This bill does not change that.
Follow-up.
Okay, no, okay, thank you, Senator, and now I'm even more confused than when we started. If I'm looking at line 1 on page 2, it's talking about out of district, not in district.
Right. So this is, if you go to your law book and you look it up, it's 193.3.
Yeah.
And if you do a comparison of 193.3 with this language, you will see that line 24, section E, is new language. They alter a little bit of the language on page 2 to clarify the law in general, but none of that going out of district is not changed. That is already current law. And the way that people would pay for that is going through the process of manifest hardship, or using an EFA, but that is already existing law. All that this bill is doing is allowing people in the same school district to choose which school that they want to go to within the district.
Okay, thank you. I don't read it that way.
I
When I see
understand.
out of school district, I don't read it that way, but I appreciate your interpretation. Thank you.
So,
That's okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
Because there was some confusion this in the Senate, and we did have, I don't think, they're not here. The School Boards Association did speak to this for clarification. Again, if you look at 193.3 and you compare the two, all of that in the top part of that is existing law. That's manifest hardship. You have to go to the superintendent. You have to present sort of a case for yourself. We're adding at line 24 that says you don't have to present a case if you want to stay intra-district and go to a school within your district. You simply have to go to the superintendent and say, it is in the best interest of my child if they switch to a different school. That's it. That's all that it says. And then they make a determination based on capacity. And they have to have language around a policy that will work with parents if there isn't capacity, what that looks like, what a wait list might look like. And that's it. That's all that this does.
Representative Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for taking my question. I think you had mentioned that this does not have any fiscal impact, but when I was looking at the amended analysis in the back, it did say that you were still waiting for a fiscal note from the DOE or some other additional information through a worksheet. So I was curious if that had come through or where that process stood.
Thank you. I have not seen a fiscal note on this. Like I said, where parents are paying for the transportation and it's intra-district, there shouldn't be a financial implication for the schools. And we're not forcing schools to take in students that they don't have capacity for.
Representative Selig.
Thank you. Sorry, and thank you for taking another question.
Sure.
In your testimony, you talked about creating a wait list and something else. So are you suggesting that there might be more children who apply to change schools within a district, and so that maybe they could take 4 kids and not 6 kids? And I'm just trying to understand, so there would then be an impact on the last 2 who applied, or would it be lottery system? How are they going to make determinations? Is it family based? Like your sibling got to transfer there, so you get to, even though their family applied 4 months earlier? I'm curious, and just in terms of the changing numbers of classroom teachers and whatnot.
Thank you for the question. That's up to the district. So that's what it states in the bill, that the school will make that policy. And that's up to them. That's their control.
Any further questions? Representative Brink, one more?
Thank you, thanks for your patience, I appreciate it. So I just, in the event that a student transfers intra-district through this process, is it a single transfer once a year? Or could it possibly be the case that, grandma, grandpa decide they want to move in with their adult children as they're aging and then need to retransfer back?
Yeah, so I believe there is a once a year by July 1st for the upcoming year. Of course, if there's an emergency, the parents can always go to the superintendent and explain it to them, but it is by July 1st.
Any further questions? Representative Litchfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question. I'm just curious, would this impact only a relatively small number of districts? Are we talking about like Manchester, Nashua, Portsmouth? Is that the kind of thing we're looking at?
Thank you. It would impact any city or town that has multiple schools for the same grade levels. So if you get more than one high school, if you get more than one elementary school, it would impact. So smaller towns that don't have more options, it wouldn't impact at all.
Yes, Representative Cornell.
Thank you for taking my question. It does say outside the district though, so it could impact any place in the state.
So again, thank you for the question. Again, that's existing law. This is not
So,
changing
but
that
but
existing
it-
law.
It would affect any place in the state though. It is existing law, but it could say someone from Manchester could say, I want to go to Bedford, and if there's room in Bedford, they would have to take them?
Thank you. That is the way that the law is today.
Okay.
This doesn't change that at all. And they wouldn't have to. That would be the process that they would have to talk to going out of the school district. This does not change that.
Representative Damon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question, following up on the question you've just had. So in existing law, it states repeatedly if the parent or guardian believes it would be in the best interest of the student. In the proposed bill, that language about the best interest of the student is removed. So am I correct in understanding that the proposed law would in fact allow a family to transfer their child out of district for any reason whatsoever? So in the example of Manchester, Bedford, you can currently do that now for manifest hardship, but this is really taking away that criteria. Is that correct?
No. You would still have to go to the
Explain to me how it
superintendent and you would
doesn't.
still have to go through the process that you currently do for manifest hardship. There's going to be an exchange of funds there. You have to tuition into another school. And so you have to go through the same process that has always been the case. This does not change that.
Representative Woodcock.
Last question for me.
Thank you.
I was thinking the same thing. Anyhow, so here's my question. I've heard you mention several times the School Board Association was involved in drafting, right? So are you telling me the School Board Association supports this bill as written?
So they neither were for it or against, but they did offer language that they wanted in there for the policy to be up to the school district. So they helped I put in, it's amended verbatim what the School Board Association had requested me to put in.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Damon.
Thank you. And one more question going back to the requiring the school board of each district to establish a policy when there's not capacity for as many students as want to transfer. Could you share what you think that policy would look like? How is there supposed to be fairness in that? So what would be the criteria for who goes and who doesn't?
Again, that would be up to the school district. I mean, the charter schools do it all the time. They have a lottery system that they do. Private schools have to make such determinations as well. So I'm sure, I have confidence in our school districts that they would be able to come up with a policy that works for their district. But if I may direct people to lines 13 through 19, that is existing law. The superintendent shall include a meeting with the parents or guardian to be held within 10 days of the request. Prior to such a meeting, this is out of district now. Prior to such a meeting, the parent or guardian shall make a specific request that the student be reassigned to the school board, to another public school, public academy, or approved charter school within the district, to a public school, public academy, or approved charter school in other district. At such a meeting, the parent or guardian may represent documents, witnesses, whatsoever. So this is all existing law to taking someone out of the regular their district into an out of district public school or a private school. That is existing law that has not changed at all.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator. Thank you for presenting this bill.
Thank you, and that seat suits you, Representative.
Was there anyone else who wanted to testify on this bill?
Attorney Fenton, come up.
Attorney Fenton, would you like to, there seems to be some technical assistance that is being asked for. Morning, thank you. Were there questions for Representative Balboni?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming up. I think there's the question that I have is I'm looking at the book and I'm looking at that section and I'm wondering, I can see some of that language is included, but there is additional language that's being added and perhaps that is for clarification, but I don't understand, like in section 1, it refers to just the change of school assignment, how they can do it. But then we talk about manifest educational hardship in section 2. And I'm wondering if you can just clarify for me, what's the difference between the two sections and why is manifest hardship separate than this section?
Well, thank you for the question. I think that putting aside the bill that's currently in front of you, Senate Bill 97, RSA 193.3 has been a very challenging statute to interpret, and it has also been the subject of a lot of legislative changes over the last 8-10 years. And so when you look at 193.3, it's really best to kind of outline it if you can, because first of all, I think the title of 193.3 is misleading. The title is Change of School or Assignment, Best Interest of Student, but manifest educational hardship is embedded within there. And that was a legislative change to separate out best interest and manifest educational hardship. So best interest is listed first in section 1, and then manifest educational hardship is second. It's two separate analyses. And if one doesn't work, then you go into manifest educational hardship, is my understanding of how it is currently written. So when you look at 193:3, there is an enormous amount of information and important process embedded within it. Ideally, it would be best to break it into its own separate sections. Not that I'm saying we need more length to this book, but in terms of the understanding, the ability to easily read it and understand what it is, because it is a very important process. But that's kind of the long-winded answer to your question, is you're looking at two different processes. Thank you. Best interest and then manifest educational hardship. They are separate, yet interrelated, if that helps.
Follow up.
Please.
Can you then go into explaining a little bit more best interests versus educational hardship? And the sticky point that keeps coming up when I'm looking at it is that outside of the district piece to it, which is being added. I can see it's in, I think, C, but this also puts it back up in A, the additional lines. So thank you.
To really understand the difference between best interest and manifest educational hardship, I would be happy to provide this committee with examples of cases that have looked at that. That's one of the things that the governance unit does at the Department of Education is we will deal with challenges to findings of best interests or manifest educational hardship. I think that's the best way to explain it. You know, my very cursory understanding is this, and I don't want to do it any disservice, but best interest is this school just isn't working out for my kid. It's just not the right fit. And that happens sometimes. It's just not the right fit. Whereas manifest educational hardship is exactly what the words say, right? My child is suffering a hardship because of this placement, right? It is detrimental to their ability to learn. And we have talked about many times in front of the state board, manifest educational hardship is not my kid's a really good swimmer, and guess what? My school doesn't have a swim team. That's not it. And we have enormous number of cases, I believe you can find them on our website, but I'll double check that really look into what the difference is between them. So I'm happy to provide that information to the committee. I think to really understand the difference between the two, I would suggest you look at those, you always go back to the case law, right? In terms of this bill, I'm happy to look at these pointed questions. I am going to defer in large part to the prior testimony of Senator Sullivan, because I think she understands the purpose, the nature, and the intent of this better than I do. It's her legislation. But if you want to direct me to your question.
The specific question was the one, why are we adding the language in section 1A that says in the italics there, whereas, I can see that some of that out-of-district language is in C. What's the purpose or what's the legality behind moving that up into section 1A? And that would be lines, on the first page, lines 5 through 12.
5 through 12. So, again, I'm going to defer in large part to the prior testimony. However, my understanding is that this language doesn't change the current law. It just adds what they hope to be clarification. And then is talking about the intra-district transfer. I think that's what's trying to be set apart. And again, I don't like to tread on other people's testimony, but they're trying to cull out the intra-district transfer as being separate and apart from the other transfers that can happen under this section. But again, I tread so lightly, so if I make a mistake there, what's that? Oh, perfect. All right. I got the thumbs up emoji. But I think that's the idea, is to say intra-district transfers are different, fundamentally different than going outside of your school district. And that's what they're trying to cull out and have be their own separate section. And again, I don't want to misinform. And it could be clarified better, right? Again, I go back to what I previously said. 193.3, I cannot emphasize this enough, has been repeatedly changed legislatively. And you can see that on page 540 under the historic and statutory notes. There's a reason for this provision. This is why we put in the amendments. Look at how many amendments have occurred, significant amendments. These are not just changing a word here and there. These are significant changes to a very important process that a lot of parents rely on. It is fundamental for some students' success, frankly. And these changes go on for almost a page. So because of that, not only is 193.3 critical legislation that we all rely on, I have worked very closely with it, but there's an enormous amount of information in this and important processes. So I think the idea behind this bill that is in front of you right now, Senate Bill 97, is to identify and cull out intra-district transfers, saying that these are different and having a process for that.
Representative Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for taking my question. So if I'm understanding you correct with respect to SB 97 and with respect to the intra-district transfer, your if I understood you correctly, you are saying that there is essentially a lower threshold requirement for best interest placements than there is for manifest hardship requests.
I don't think that, I think that's, that's current statute. That's not
Correct.
part of this bill,
Correct.
really.
What I'm trying to understand, if I may, is whether or not the intra-district transfer is you are saying is a separate and third type of request in and of itself. So we would have, if this bill were to proceed forward, it would be best interest placement, manifest hardship, and then intra-district transfer.
I don't know if I would put them in those three different buckets. I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. I don't know if I'm not, but I would just have to look at it a little longer. But I mean, again, this talks about best interest of the student and manifest educational hardship. I agree with Representative Cordelli on that. I don't know if I would say this is another bucket. I think it's just recognizing that the intra-district transfers are maybe of a lower threshold, if that helps. Again, I don't want to.
Yeah. I see no further questions. Thank you, Attorney
you very
Fenton. Seeing no one else has signed up to testify, we'll close the hearing on SB 97, and we will take a break until 1 o'clock this afternoon. Right. Good afternoon, committee. We have one more bill to deal with, and that is Senate Bill 210, establishing a study committee to study the issue of school bullying. And we welcome Senator Fenton. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for having me. I just need 45 minutes of your time. I'm just kidding.
We've got all afternoon.
Yeah. For the record, I'm Senator Donovan Fenton. I represent District 10. And I'm here to introduce Senate Bill 210, which would establish a study committee on school bullying. We know that bullying is a serious issue that affects students across New Hampshire. When bullying occurs, it can have devastating consequences on a child's well-being, their academic success, and their ability to feel safe in a school environment. Recent events in Keene have brought this issue to the forefront, with community members expressing deep concerns about whether schools are doing enough to prevent and address bullying. While we cannot make assumptions about circumstances surrounding any specific tragedy, it is clear that we must do more to ensure that every child feels safe and supported in schools. This bill creates a committee to take a deeper look at school bullying in our state, identifying best practices for prevention and considering whether additional legislative action is needed. It's not just about assigning blame, but rather ensuring that our schools have the resources, policies, and training necessary to protect our students. The importance of this work cannot be overstated. Across the country, we have seen the profound and sometimes tragic impact of bullying, and we must take a proactive approach here in New Hampshire to understand the scope of the issue and explore meaningful solutions. I urge the committee to support this legislation so that we can take the necessary steps to protect our students and foster safer, more inclusive learning environments. Thank you. Time. How'd I do?
Under 3 minutes even.
All right, man. That was me a coffee, I think, so.
Great. Thank you very much, Senator. Questions for the Senator? Yes, Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Fenton, for coming in front of us. So just perusing the bill, I noticed that the members of the committee would be 1 member of the Senate and 3 members of the House of Representatives. So that's only 4 members. Traditionally, it's a 5-member committee. Is there any reason why this only has 4 members?
Thank you for the question, Representative. I think we've all got a little bit of guidance this year on study committees, that we all love them so much and we all are chomping at the bit to be on them. So I think, we're trying to make it a little smaller. But if you felt it needed another member of the House of Representatives, I think that's a fine addition.
Follow up?
Yes.
I actually don't feel like more members of the House should be there. I feel there should be another Senate member. So.
Thank you, Representative. In the past, it used to be 2 senators, but we've dialed it back to 1 just because of how spread thin we are in the Senate. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Representative Selig.
Thank you so much, and thank you for taking my question. Having done a related study committee previously, I think this is great. I would say we ended up having unbelievable participation from outside groups like the Child Advocate, the Attorney General's office, and others. And I think it's a wonderful idea, and would encourage, as you move forward with this, that you make sure to let them know that this will happen so that they can join their voices.
Of course, and thank you for the statement / question. I think, something also we talked about in the Senate, if you guys felt inclined to amend, was, not just the issue of kids being bullied, but the issue of teachers perhaps being bullied as well may want to be included in this.
Any further questions for the Senator?
Wow.
See none.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
You've shortest hearing of the day.
Why they pay me the big bucks.
Yeah. Thank you, Senator. And I believe the Honorable Betty Gay would like to testify. Do you want to just press? Yeah.
To the rehab this afternoon in Salem. Okay, Betty Gay from Salem, past 3-term rep. This issue is probably close to most of your hearts. I doubt if anybody here needs to be convinced that bullying is a serious problem. I was shocked 2 weeks ago when I found out that in Salem, at the high school, bullying still takes place for black kids. Blatant. You can't be in our group because you're black. The teachers hear it. They don't really know. They really don't have a tool to respond. And I'm hoping that the study committee will invite as many people to come and participate, the ones who are close to the issue, who can give them examples. And like you just mentioned, the organizations that already have devoted a lot of attention to this. The hardest thing, I think, well, I don't mean any part of it's easy, but really hard thing is, what do you do when it happens? Do you just say something and hope that that'll deter it? Or do you have some repercussions that you can say? Like I'm thinking, and feel welcome to embellish on this. First time's a warning. Second time's detention, and not with the teacher, because I found out in Salem last year that if a teacher issues detention, they get to do it. Oh, gee, that's really rewarding. You get to stay another hour after school. I'm thinking it might be somebody who really doesn't want people to think badly of him. It's usually a him. The resource officer. It needs to be somebody who it's not fun to be there, and you trust that if you step out of line, you're going to get a repercussion. And the third would be suspension. Right now, there's not really anything. That's what I'm told. And so it's, I guess, because I thought being prejudiced against black kids was passé, especially in our very non-diverse state, I was just so shocked to find out that it's blatantly said. The teachers can hear it. And the student really doesn't have, the student it happens to really doesn't have a recourse, because if they go to the teacher and the teacher says, you will take this kid, they're in a miserable situation. So they can't handle it on their own for sure. So I'm really thinking the hard part is figuring out some way that this pays badly, no matter what the bullying is, whether it's threats against the teacher or whether it's threats against the other kids. I learned from the honorable, more than honorable, Donna Sitek, that it's really an RSA, that you can get put in prison here for threatening somebody. Mm-hmm. But yet I've met a whole lot of people who in DV situations, the person making threats never was charged with it. So maybe our whole attitude about threats needs to get wider acceptance, because I was shocked to find out that, pleasantly shocked. But I've met other people who had no idea that you threaten somebody, that's a crime. And she knew it because she was on the parole board, and people were trying to get out of prison because that's why they were in. So I'm encouraging you to follow up on Representative Zalig's idea that you invite people who are experts, that you open this up to more than 4 people. And I definitely have heard the Speaker of the House's opinion about having to put people on committees. It's really hard, especially when you're asking them for more and more committees. So it's really important, but there are lots of experts. Victims, that's another thing. I've gone to other committees that are set by the state to investigate domestic abuse. After going twice, I didn't go anymore. You know who was there? It was all the organizations, state organizations that deal with it. There were no victims. They weren't going to hear about the problems. Everybody just told what they did, how they, their services they provided. Well, that's not addressing the problems. So I hope that this committee it's actively hearing what's going on so that they can really address the real issues and not theoretical issues, but really hear people who are the victims of the bullying.
Thank you very much. Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, for coming in front of us, Your Honorable. Do you know of any anti-bullying programs that they are participating in at this Salem school that you described?
No, and I apologize because now I want to know what they're doing and what's in the handbook.
Further questions? See none. Thank you so much for coming in.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for, I just know that y'all are concerned, so I don't have to be told. So, thank you.
Yes, Representative Selleck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just having been involved with organizing a study committee, they did keep it at 4 members last year as well, just to make it so that it worked for the number of appointments they needed to make. And a study committee is different from a commission in that you can't appoint outside people to attend, but you can invite.
Right.
And I know for my study committee, we just sent invitations out, and we had 20 different outside organizations come to our organizational meeting. So those organizations do want to be involved if they can.
Right. Yes, and actually, with this bill, I know of several people, parents who wanted to come and testify, but were unable to come today. So on the 23rd, we have 2 bills that we have not heard. And so I'm going to recess this bill until the 23rd also, so that those other people might be able to come and testify. So we'll get an announcement about the times and all, but I think we'll probably start at 9:30 on the 23rd. But next week, that schedule should go out. There'll be nothing for committee next week. I see all the sad faces, but we'll get our share this week. So you can take next week off. Is there anything else for the good of the committee anyone wants to bring up? Yes.
Clarification on the number of bills left that we have. I think I count 4 that we haven't heard. Unless I'm missing it. I have we were handed a pile of bills and I'm just trying to organize. So it looks to me like there were 4 that we hadn't.
Okay, maybe there's some in here that I did not have on my list, so
Okay.
well, I'll check that with the secretary.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Great. With that, we can close our work for today, and we'll see you all on Thursday. Excuse me, Wednesday. Wednesday, yes. Great, thank you very much. Yes. Yes.
One question.
Sure.
About the people who can come, can parents come and testify to a committee of this?
Sure. Yep. Definitely.